I was 60 years old when I finally understood something I should have seen a long time ago. Love doesn't always protect you from the people around it. When I married my husband, I thought I was getting a partner I could grow old with. Instead, I found myself trapped inside a family that treated me like I was there to serve them, not to live with them. His mother, his sisters, even the cousins, they all had a way of making me feel small. Like my presence was useful, but my feelings were optional. And the sad part is, I let it happen. I kept believing things would get better, that they'd see me as a real part of the family. I held on, even when it chipped at my peace a little more each day. I didn't realize how deeply I'd lost myself until the moment I finally stood up and walked away. I still remember the day I walked into that house for the first time as a married woman. I was 60 years old, carrying a suitcase in one hand and hope in the other. It wasn't the kind of hope you feel when you're young. It was quieter, softer, like something you hold carefully because you know how easily life can bruise it. I believed I had finally found a partner I could grow older with, someone who understood the value of companionship at this stage of life. When he smiled at me that morning and opened the front door, I told myself I was stepping into a new beginning. His family greeted me with warm enough smiles. His mother hugged me, though her arms felt stiff and polite. His sister commented on my dress, calling it simple and sweet, and even though she meant it as a compliment, the way her eyes scanned me up and down made me feel like she was measuring something I couldn't quite see. His brother shook my hand with a grin that didn't touch his eyes, but I brushed it all aside. I was raised to believe that families need time to blend, and I didn't expect instant closeness. People adjust at their own pace, I told myself. Just give them time. The first week passed quietly. I noticed things, small things, but I kept sweeping them under the rug in my mind. His mother would walk through the kitchen and say things like, "Oh, you don't have to cook, dear, but since you're already here," and then hand me a basket of vegetables. His sister would drop her laundry near the door and say, "Just until I get caught up," even though she never seemed to be catching up. And my husband, well, he didn't say much at all about it. He just watched, shrugged a little, and told me with an easy smile, "That's just how things are done here." I'd never lived in a household like that before. Growing up, my family wasn't wealthy or fancy, but we had respect. Everybody carried their own weight. If someone needed help, they asked, and the help was shared, not expected. But in that house, there was a rhythm they'd all grown used to, and I quickly realized I was supposed to slip into it like a new piece fitting into an old puzzle. A puzzle I never helped build. A puzzle that didn't bend to make room for me. Still, I tried. I really tried. At 60 years old, you think a person stops spending so much, but sometimes love, or the fear of losing it, makes you shape yourself in ways you never thought possible. I told myself it was temporary. Maybe they were just testing the waters, trying to see who I was, how I handled myself. Maybe they were waiting for me to show I could be part of their world, part of their routines. So when they asked me to help with dinner, I helped. When they asked me to iron shirts, I ironed. When they asked me to watch the house while they went out, I stayed behind. And each time, they smiled and said how helpful I was. Helpful. That became their favorite word for me. Polite, but never affectionate. Appreciative, but never grateful. I'd stand in the kitchen chopping vegetables while the rest of them sat in the living room laughing about memories I wasn't part of, stories I didn't know. Sometimes I'd peek in from the doorway and hear them talk about old trips, inside jokes, things they'd done before I came into the picture. They never paused long enough to include me. I was there but not really there. I was needed but not wanted. I tried talking to my husband once gently, because I didn't want to seem dramatic. I told him I felt overwhelmed, that maybe we could set a few boundaries, so I didn't feel like I was doing everything alone. He kissed my forehead and said, "Honey, you're doing great. Everyone appreciates you." But he didn't ask how I felt. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask if I needed anything in return. That was the first time I felt something small crack inside me, not because of the work, but because of how invisible my feelings suddenly seemed. The following weeks only deepened that quiet ache. I noticed that when guests came over, his family introduced me in a way that made me feel like a helpful neighbor instead of someone who shared a life with him. "This is Janet," his sister would say politely. "She's so wonderful around the house." Sometimes people assumed I was the housekeeper, and instead of correcting them, his family just smiled faintly. My husband even laughed once, said, "Well, she does keep things running smoothly." I laughed too, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of laugh you push out to keep from breaking. I remember one evening clearly. I'd been cooking since afternoon, preparing a meal because his mother called asking if I could whip up something nice for dinner. When everything was done and the table was set, his family sat down like they always did, barely acknowledging the hours I'd spent. I waited for my husband to offer me the first serving, something he used to do when we were alone. Instead, he just started eating, lost in conversation with his brother. When I finally sat, his mother looked at me and said, almost with a hint of surprise, "Oh, you're joining us?" And everyone laughed softly, like it was some light-hearted joke. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt like being told my place was in the kitchen, not at the table. But I kept pushing the feelings down, telling myself it was just an adjustment period, that families take time to blend, that maybe I was being sensitive because everything was new. And, truthfully, I didn't want to start a fight. At my age, peace means more than pride, and I desperately wanted peace. I wanted the marriage I dreamed of, not just the man but the life I believed we could build. I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. And there were small moments, tiny ones, that made me hold on. The evenings my husband and I watched TV together. The mornings we drank coffee on the porch before the household woke up. The few whispered thank yous he gave when it was just the two of us. Those moments felt like pieces of safety, little reminders of why I'd said yes to this marriage in the first place. But the truth is, even small cracks can spread quietly across the foundation of your life. And the longer you pretend not to see them, the deeper they run. One night, when the house was asleep, I stood alone in the kitchen wiping down the counters. The window above the sink was open, and the breeze felt cool against my face. I looked around at the dishes drying, the leftover meal packed away, the spotless floor. And I felt this heaviness inside me, a feeling that whispered, "This isn't temporary, this is becoming your life." It scared me, not because the work was too much, but because I could feel myself disappearing inside the routine. I closed the window, turned off the lights, and walked quietly to the room I shared with my husband. He was already asleep, breathing softly. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, realizing I had slowly started shrinking myself just to fit into a space that wasn't made for me. And the worst part was, I'd been doing it willingly, convincing myself it was for love, for harmony, for the hope of something better. But deep down, something fragile in me knew. The house I entered wasn't a home. Not yet. And maybe not ever. I didn't know it then, but that quiet realization was the beginning of everything that would come next. The doubts, the hurt, the changes, and eventually, the moment I would finally gather the strength to reclaim myself. For now, though, I stayed sitting there in the dark, holding on to the thinning threads of hope, not realizing how close they were to snapping. And this was only the beginning. I wish I could tell you that things got easier after those first few weeks, that the house started feeling like a home, or that my husband eventually noticed the strain on my shoulders. But the truth is, what began as small favors slowly shaped themselves into expectations, and those expectations hardened into daily demands. It didn't happen overnight. It was subtle, almost gentle in the beginning, the way a quiet drip can fill a bucket without you realizing it. At first, it was simple requests. "Can you fold these? Would you mind starting dinner? Could you iron this shirt real quick? Can you handle the guest room before they arrive?" Things that sounded reasonable, even considerate. After all, we were living together, sharing a life. Helping out wasn't something I minded. But soon those requests came with an undertone, a soft assumption that of course I would do them, that of course it was my place, that of course it was my job. Before I even realized it, their sentences started changing. Not can you, but you'll have to. Or make sure. Or don't forget. It felt like invisible lines were being drawn around me, slowly shrinking the space where I was allowed to simply exist without being assigned something. I remember one morning when I woke up early, earlier than everyone else, as usual, and I was standing in the kitchen waiting for the coffee to brew. My husband came in, kissed my cheek, and asked if I could make breakfast for the whole family, because he had an early meeting. Before I could answer, he was already heading out the door, shouting, "Thanks, honey," behind him. I stared at the empty doorway for a moment, holding the coffee pot like it was the only thing keeping me upright. It wasn't the cooking that bothered me, it was how automatically he assumed I'd take care of everything. It felt like my identity had slowly shifted into something quieter, smaller, someone who existed to make everyone else's day easier at the cost of my own. That's when I started noticing how the rest of the family spoke to me too. His mother had a way of giving instructions that sounded like compliments laced with control. "You're so good in the kitchen. Why don't you take over dinner tonight? You have such a gentle way about you. The laundry should be your area. You're so patient. You're perfect for handling the guests." Every sentence sounded sweet on the surface, but underneath, it carried a message. This is your role. This is who you are here. This is what we expect. If I made even the smallest mistake, a dish too salty, a shirt not ironed the way she liked, a guest towel placed on the wrong shelf, her mother-in-law would give me a tight smile, the kind that hurt more than any insult. "Oh, it's okay, dear. I guess you just don't know how we do things here." Every time she said those words, "how we do things here," I felt further and further away from any sense of belonging. It was like being reminded again and again that this wasn't my family, not really. I was a guest who never left, a helper who never clocked out. His sister wasn't any kinder. She loved pointing out what she called little oversights, saying things like, "Oh, you didn't dust the shelf? Oh, the towels aren't folded our way? Oh, the dishwasher isn't loaded the correct style?" Her voice was soft, always soft, like she was being helpful. But the softness made it worse. It made me feel like a child being corrected, not a grown woman with decades of experience running her own home. I tried talking to my husband again. I told him I felt overwhelmed, that I felt more like their employee than his wife. He sighed, looked tired, and said, "They're just particular. You know how they are. Don't take it personally." But I did take it personally. How could I not? He wasn't listening. He wasn't seeing me. He wasn't standing by me. His family treated me like I was on the bottom rung of some staircase, and instead of reaching down to help me climb, he stood at the top pretending nothing was wrong. Sometimes we'd be sitting in the living room together, me on one end of the couch, him on the other, and his family would call out from the hallway, "Janet, can you grab this? Janet, could you fix that? Janet, the trash needs to be taken out." They didn't call him. They didn't call his sister. They didn't call his mother. Only me. My husband would look at me with a helpless shrug, saying, "Just ignore it if you want." But how do you ignore people standing 3 feet away calling your name? One night, after a long day of cleaning and cooking without a single thank you, I sat at the dinner table and looked around. Everyone was laughing, talking, enjoying the meal. My husband seemed relaxed, content. His mother was telling stories. His sister was scrolling through her phone, chiming in here and there. And there I was, exhausted, invisible, and smiling through it so no one would accuse me of being sensitive. I realized then that I didn't have a seat at that table. I had a function, a job, and they didn't even see it. The pressure kept building. It wasn't physical exhaustion. Though some nights my body ached, it was emotional suffocation. It was the way they watched me, like I was being evaluated. The way they depended on me, yet never acknowledged the weight they placed on my shoulders. The way my husband drifted further into their world, and further away from mine. One afternoon, I overheard his mother and sister whispering in the hallway. I didn't mean to listen. I was just passing by. His mother said, "She's helpful, but she's not really one of us." His sister replied, "She'll adjust. She doesn't have much else going on." I froze. Not one of us. Doesn't have much else going on. Those words sank into my chest like stones. They didn't see me as a partner, or a member of the family, or someone deserving of respect. They saw me as someone who should be grateful just to stand in the same house. That evening, when I stood at the sink washing dishes, tears rolled down my cheeks without me even realizing it. I had been holding so much inside, trying to keep peace, trying to keep a marriage afloat in an ocean of expectations I never agreed to. But the water kept rising, and no one was helping me stay afloat. The worst part wasn't their demands. It was how normal it became, how easily everyone accepted it except me, how naturally I slipped into the background like a shadow that moved but never spoke. And through all of it, the man I married, the man I chose, kept choosing silence, kept choosing them, kept choosing the comfort of avoiding conflict over the comfort of protecting his wife. That realization didn't come with anger. Not at first. It came with a quiet sadness, like grieving something that isn't dead yet but is slowly fading away. I knew then that something had to change, whether it was me, my marriage, or my willingness to keep sacrificing myself for people who made me feel smaller every single day. But at that moment, all I could do was wipe my face, breathe, and keep going, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't yet know how to stop. And deep inside, something whispered that the storm had only just begun. I can tell you the exact moment something inside me finally cracked. Not broke all at once, but cracked like a hairline fracture in glass that you don't notice until the light hits it just right. It happened on a warm Saturday morning during one of their big family gatherings. The kind they hosted every few weeks, the kind everyone seemed to enjoy except me. I woke up early that day, earlier than anyone else, because they had decided, without ever asking me, that I'd be the one cooking for 20 people. 20. That number still rings in my head. I don't know when it became normal for me to shoulder that kind of work, but by then the expectations were already set in stone. Their stone, not mine. The house was loud before noon. Shoes scraping across the floor, voices filling the hallways, doors opening and closing like the whole place was breathing fast and shallow. Everyone moved in groups, laughing, talking, chatting about their plans and memories and jokes I was never part of. And there I was in the kitchen, my back turned to them, shoulders tight, hands busy. The kitchen felt like a small island I wasn't allowed to leave. Pots boiling, the oven humming, trays waiting to go in, dishes piling up faster than I could wash them. Every time someone passed by the doorway, I caught a glimpse of people relaxing on the couch, sipping drinks, enjoying the morning sunlight. Not once did anyone pause long enough to ask how I was doing, if I needed anything, if I even wanted to be there. I try to tell myself it was just a busy day. Just one of those moments where everyone gets caught up in the excitement and forgets the details. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't forgetfulness. It was expectation. Quiet, heavy, automatic expectation. Around midday, I felt a sharp ache in my lower back. I had been standing for hours, lifting heavy pots, bending, reaching, turning, moving nonstop. So when everything was finally simmering, baking, roasting, warming, in that brief 10 minutes of breathing room, I pulled out a chair and slowly sat down. I didn't flop into the seat, or sigh dramatically, or ask for sympathy. I just sat down because I needed to. My back was hurting. My legs were shaking. My hands were trembling from the heat and the work. But apparently, that was too much for them. I heard footsteps behind me. Then a voice, sharp, clipped, judgmental. "Oh, you're sitting?" I didn't even have to turn around. I knew it was my sister-in-law. She had a way of making every simple sentence sound like an accusation. I forced a smile anyway. "Just resting my back for a moment," I said quietly. She clicked her tongue. Well, the appetizers aren't out yet, and everyone's waiting. Everyone's waiting. Not, are you okay? Not, can I help? Just get up. Keep going. I stood. Slowly, carefully. The ache in my back pulsed with every movement, but I pushed through it because that's what I always did. I plated the appetizers, arranged them neatly, and brought them out to the dining room where the family was already gathered like royalty waiting for a servant. No one thanked me. No one noticed the strain in my face. No one cared. I went back to the kitchen and kept working. The smell of roasted vegetables filled the air. The heat from the oven washed over me again and again. I lost track of time. I lost track of myself. At one point, I stepped outside onto the back porch just to feel a breath of cool air. I wasn't out there for more than 30 seconds when I heard them talking inside, voices floating from the living room, light but clear. "She's better off working than talking," my sister-in-law said. The laughter that followed felt like a slap. I froze, my hand on the doorframe, my heart heavy in my chest. Better off working than talking. I don't know why that sentence cut deeper than anything else I'd heard. Maybe it was because it put into words what I'd been feeling for months, that they didn't see me as a person with thoughts, feelings, or needs. They saw me as labor, as help, as convenience, a servant, not family, not even truly human in their eyes. I stood outside for a few seconds longer, letting those words echo in my mind. The air felt colder suddenly. The sky looked darker. Something inside me went quiet, like a switch flipping off. Not anger, not sadness, just quiet. When I finally walked back inside, the noise of the house felt distant, like I was hearing it from behind a closed door. I kept cooking, plating, carrying dishes to the dining room, refilling drinks, wiping counters. But I wasn't there anymore, not really. The moment of humiliation didn't end with my sister-in-law's comment. It got worse. Dinner time came. Everyone gathered around the table. I brought out the main dishes, heavy, steaming, beautiful, and placed them carefully in front of the crowd. The compliments went to the food. Not me. Not the person who had poured hours into making it. Just the food. Then, just as I finally sat down, my legs shaking again, my back screaming, my husband leaned toward me and whispered, "Can you get the bread from the oven?" As if I hadn't been on my feet all day. I looked at him, really looked at him, and his eyes held nothing but expectation. He didn't see exhaustion. He didn't see pain. He didn't see me. I stood up again. Not because I wanted to, but because in that moment, saying no felt like lighting a match in a room full of gas. I wasn't ready for an explosion. Not yet. But when I returned with the bread basket and saw everyone laughing, eating, enjoying themselves while I remained on the edges of their world, something inside me shifted. The humiliation wasn't sharp anymore. It was heavy. It sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. It settled in my stomach like cold stone. It wrapped itself around my heart until I could barely breathe. It was the moment I realized I wasn't just being mistreated. I was being erased. My husband didn't defend me. He didn't stand up for me. He didn't see the problem. And that hurt in a way that words can't fully capture. Later that night, after the guests had left and the house had quieted down, I stood alone in the kitchen. The sink piled with dishes. The counters splattered. The floor sticky. My husband had gone to bed without offering to help. His family was long gone, full and satisfied. And there I was, hands trembling over a mountain of dirty plates, feeling more alone inside a crowded life than I ever had before. I washed in silence, dried in silence, cleaned in silence. The whole time, my mind repeating those awful words. She's better off working than talking. By the time I placed the last bowl in the cabinet, something inside me had changed completely. The part of me that kept trying to please them, to fit in, to make everyone comfortable even at the cost of myself, she was gone. And in her place stood a quieter version of me. Not angry, not loud, Just aware. Aware that this family didn't value me. Aware that my husband didn't protect me. Aware that I had been shrinking myself for people who never even noticed. After that night, I started keeping emotional distance. Not on purpose at first. It just happened naturally, like pulling your hand away from a flame the moment you realize it's burning you. I stopped initiating conversations. Stopped sitting with them in the living room. Stopped volunteering for every task. Stopped filling every silence with effort. And for the first time in months, I felt something like clarity. A small spark of myself returning. I wasn't fully awake yet, but the awakening had begun. After that family gathering, the one that left me feeling like a worn-out tool rather than a person, something inside me went still. It didn't erupt. It didn't scream. It didn't fight. It just quieted. I didn't plan it. I didn't sit down and think, I'm going to go silent. It just happened the way night falls after sunset, slowly, softly, naturally. A gentle fading, a dimming, a pulling back of myself from a world that no longer felt safe. In the days that followed, I moved differently. Not dramatically. Not in a way that anyone could point at and say, she's acting strange. No. My shift was subtle, deliberate, like a person placing each step carefully on thin ice. I spoke less, watched more, listened harder. Silence became the only place where I could hear myself again. I stopped trying to fit into conversations where my voice was never welcome. Stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided I was less than them. Stopped trying to earn smiles that were never meant for me. Instead, I became observant. And once I started paying attention, not to what they said, but to how they behaved, I saw everything more clearly than I ever had before. I noticed the entitlement in the smallest moments. The way my mother-in-law would walk into a room and place her empty tea mug beside me, without a word, as if that simple gesture was some universal signal for me to fix her a fresh cup. The way my sister-in-law would intentionally leave messes behind, glancing back only to make sure I saw them. The way my husband would brush off my exhaustion with a wave of his hand. It's just a few chores, he'd say. Mom's getting older. You're better at keeping things tidy anyway. Better. That word haunted me. Better at serving. Better at cooking. Better at staying small. But the more I watched, the more I realized this wasn't about me being better. It was about them being used to convenience, to obedience, to having someone soften the world for them by doing all the work behind the scenes. And I had let them do it. I had handed them that power piece by piece, trying to keep the peace, trying to make a home that was never mine. The silence helped me see that. My husband noticed the change first. Of course he did, not because he cared, but because it disrupted the routine he'd grown comfortable with. The first night, I didn't force a conversation over dinner. He looked up from his plate with a frown. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "You're quiet," he said, waiting for me to talk the way I always did. I simply said, "I'm tired." He wasn't satisfied with that. He looked at me for a long moment and then shrugged, muttering, "Women get emotional over everything." I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. The silence continued the next morning. And the next. I moved through the house like a soft shadow, still doing what I needed to do, still keeping things steady, but without the extra words, the extra effort, the extra emotional labor I had been pouring out for months. And with each quiet day, I learned something new. I learned how quickly people lose interest in you when you stop doing things for them. I learned how uncomfortable entitlement becomes when it's not constantly fed. I learned that silence has a way of exposing the parts of people they try to hide. My mother-in-law grew irritated first. She hovered near me more often, watching me, looking for mistakes she could point out. But when I didn't respond with explanations or apologies, she didn't know what to do with herself. My lack of reaction unsettled her. My sister-in-law followed, poking at me with passive comments, "Rough morning," or "Someone's moody today," as if she was trying to bait me back into the version of myself that made her feel superior. But I didn't bite. Their frustration built like a slow storm. And then it reached my husband. One night after dinner, he closed the dishwasher louder than necessary, turned toward me, and said firmly, "You're acting strange. I don't like it." I just looked at him, waiting. He continued, "You used to be warm. Now you barely talk. It's like living with a stranger." A stranger. The irony almost made me smile, if it weren't so painfully true. I had been living like a stranger in that house long before my silence began. Only now he was noticing the distance because it wasn't convenient for him. Because I'd stopped cushioning his world with my constant understanding and patience. I met his eyes and said quietly, "I'm just thinking." That wasn't enough for him. He crossed his arms, irritation tightening his face. "Thinking about what? Is this some phase? Some dramatic thing?" His words didn't hurt the way they once would have. The silence had given me a strange kind of armor, not made of anger, but of clarity. "No," I said softly. "Just thinking." He rolled his eyes and walked away, muttering something under his breath about me being too sensitive. But in my silence, I had finally begun seeing him clearly too, not the man I'd hoped he would be, but the man he actually was. And once you see somebody clearly, you can't unsee them. I noticed how rarely he thanked me, how often he dismissed me, how quick he was to defend his family, even when they were undeniably wrong, how much he needed me to stay small so he could feel big. I noticed the tone he used with me versus the tone he used with them. Softer with them, shorter with me, more demanding, less respectful. And I noticed how little he seemed to care about my emotional well-being. As long as dinner was ready, clothes were folded, and the house ran the way his family wanted it to run. These realizations didn't come in one grand moment. They came in fragments, quiet observations, stacking on top of each other until the weight of them became impossible to ignore. But the silence didn't just expose them. It revealed something in me too. It revealed how exhausted I truly was. How much of my spirit I had given away trying to fit into a life that didn't fit me back. How long I had been carrying loneliness like an invisible burden on my shoulders. And how desperately I needed space, not distance from them, but closeness to myself. My silence became a sanctuary, a place where I could breathe, a place where I could listen to my own needs, a place where I could finally ask myself questions I'd been avoiding. Am I happy here? Is this the marriage I deserve? Is this the life I want to grow old in? The answers didn't come quickly. They rose slowly, like the tide, soft at first, then certain. No, I wasn't happy. No, I didn't deserve this. No, this wasn't the life I wanted. Once I allowed myself to see the truth, something remarkable happened. I stopped blaming myself. I stopped trying to fix what I didn't break. I stopped exhausting myself to prove my worth. The moment I abandoned self-blame, a calmness entered my life that no one in that house could touch. And that calmness, it became my strength. I didn't tell anyone about my inner shift. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten to leave or demand change. I simply watched and learned and waited for the moment when my clarity would turn into action. By then, I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't looking to hurt anyone. I wasn't even looking to leave. I was looking for truth. And that truth was getting louder every day, inside my silence, inside my heart, inside my bones. The breaking point was coming. I could feel it. Not like a storm about to explode, but like a sunrise waiting to rise. Quiet, steady, certain. And though the house still felt heavy around me, my spirit felt lighter than it had in months. Because for the first time since I married into that family, I wasn't lost anymore. I was waking up. By the time everything inside me went quiet, I thought I had seen the worst of that house. I thought I had already reached the bottom of what they could take from me. But I was wrong. There was still one moment left, one moment that would break the last thread holding me to that life. It happened on a Tuesday evening, sometime between the dinner dishes and folding laundry. I remember feeling a strange heaviness in my chest, the kind that doesn't come from work or age, but from carrying too much for too long. I was standing in the kitchen, rinsing a pot, when the room tilted just slightly. Not violently, almost politely, like the world was whispering, "Sit down now." But I didn't listen. I told myself I was just tired. I could finish up. I could push through it like I pushed through everything. And then, without warning, my vision blurred. The edges of the countertop softened. My knees gave out before I even realized what was happening. I don't remember falling. I don't remember hitting the floor. I only remember the coldness of the tiles against my cheek and the way the world sounded far away, like I was underwater. I don't know how long I was out. Minutes, an hour. I really couldn't say. But I remember waking up to silence. Not peaceful silence. Not the protective silence I had built for myself these past weeks. This silence felt heavy, hollow, empty. I blinked slowly, trying to get my bearings. My head hurt. My body felt limp. The house around me was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps. No voices. No one calling my name. No one checking on me. It was as if my collapse never happened. I pushed myself upright, using the counter to steady my shaking legs. And in that moment, with the kitchen still spinning slightly around me, something inside me cracked open. Not like a break, but like a realization. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. Not in that house. I looked around slowly, and every memory from the past months came rushing back to me. The chores, the orders, the silence, the disrespect, the nights I cried in the bathroom so no one would hear. It all blended into one truth, sharp and cold. If I had never gotten up from that floor, they would have stepped over me before they ever thought to check on me. That thought, it shook me deeper than the fall itself. I leaned on the counter a long moment, listening to the house hum with that same cold indifference. Then I walked to the living room. My husband was there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. He didn't even look up. I stood there quietly, staring at him, waiting, hoping, maybe foolishly, that he would notice the unsteadiness in my breathing or the faint redness on my cheek from where I hit the tile. But he didn't. Not even a glance. And in that moment, I understood something with complete clarity. I was alone in that marriage, even when someone sat just 10 feet away. I went to bed that night without saying a word. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to my heartbeat, slow, steady, almost too quiet. But inside my chest, something new was forming. Not anger, not revenge, not even sadness. Resolve. The kind that grows only after you've survived what you shouldn't have had to survive alone. By sunrise, my decision was made. I sat up slowly, taking a deep breath that felt like it belonged to someone new. Someone waking up after years of sleep. I walked to the closet and pulled out a small overnight bag, the kind I used to pack for weekend trips back when life felt lighter. I didn't rush. I folded a few outfits neatly, added my toothbrush, grabbed my medications, and slipped in the worn paperback I'd been trying to finish for months. I didn't pack everything. Not because I planned to return, but because I didn't need that house's belongings to reclaim my life. I packed only what belonged to me. My peace, my dignity, my choice. At the front door, I paused for just a second, listening for any sign of movement from upstairs. Nothing. Just the same indifferent quiet I'd grown used to. I stepped outside and closed the door gently behind me. The morning air felt different, cool on my skin, almost like a blessing. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the world lift, even if only slightly. I walked to my car, unlocked it, sat down, and rested my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't feel fear. I felt free. I drove across town to a friend I hadn't visited in years, someone who once knew the vibrant version of me, the version I had pushed so far down I almost forgot she existed. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise, then softened with concern. "What happened?" she asked gently. And for the first time in a long time, I told the truth. Not every detail, but enough. Enough for her face to fall. Enough for her to open her arms and pull me inside without hesitation. She let me stay in her guest room, the one with sunlight that spilled across the floor in warm patches. The first night there, I slept with a peace so deep it felt like it healed something inside me. Days passed quietly. My friend cooked dinners. We drank tea on her porch. I watched the world without rushing into it. The calm felt foreign at first, like trying on a coat that didn't quite fit. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized this was how life was supposed to feel. Then, on the third evening, my phone started vibrating on the nightstand. My husband's name lit up the screen again and again. I didn't answer the first time, or the second. By the fifth call, I took a deep breath and finally picked up. "Where are you?" he demanded. Not worried, not scared, just irritated. I didn't answer immediately. I let my silence, speak first. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, steady, unrecognizably strong. "I'm safe," I said simply. "That's not what I asked," he snapped. "You can't just walk out." "I didn't walk out," I said gently. "I walked away." He went quiet, completely quiet, and I could almost feel his confusion through the phone. My tone didn't match the woman he was used to, the one who apologized, who explained, who softened everything for him. This time, I wasn't soft. I wasn't loud either. I was simply done. He finally spoke. "What's all this about? You're blowing things out of proportion again." Again. That word used to crush me. This time, it didn't. It just confirmed everything. "I fainted," I said quietly. "On the kitchen floor." Silence. "And nobody noticed," I continued. "Not even you." Still silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was defensive, almost annoyed. "Well, you should have said something." I felt something inside me close, not painfully, but firmly, like a book that had reached the last page. "I'm not coming back to that house," I said softly. His breath caught. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just." "I'm done being treated like a servant," I said, not raising my voice. "I'm done being invisible. And I'm done pretending this is a marriage." There was a long pause. He wasn't used to this version of me. This strength. This clarity. This quiet refusal. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice small for the first time. "Yes," I said. "I am." Another long silence. This time it was him struggling to breathe through it, not me. And in that silence, I heard something I'd never heard from him before. Fear. Not of losing me, but of losing control. He whispered, "I never thought you'd actually leave." And that was the truth, wasn't it? He never thought I'd stand up. Never thought I'd choose myself. Never thought I'd realize I deserved better. His shock revealed everything. How much he had relied on my obedience, my patience, my willingness to endure. But now I was done enduring. Done shrinking. Done giving my soul to a house that didn't even see me. "I'll talk when I'm ready," I said softly, ending the call. I set the phone down, took a long breath, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not a big smile, not a triumphant smile, but a real one. Small, quiet, honest. The kind of smile that comes from choosing yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. When I left that house, I didn't walk out with confidence. I didn't walk out with certainty. I didn't even walk out with a plan. I left with a small bag and a heart that had been worn thin, hoping that somewhere out there was a life where I didn't have to earn basic kindness. Those first few days at my friend's home, they felt like stepping into a world I had forgotten existed. A world with quiet mornings. A world where nobody barked orders. A world where kindness didn't have strings attached. I remember waking up in her guest room the first morning, sunlight spilling across the wall like warm paint, and thinking, This can't be my life, not after everything I've been through. But it was. And it was the beginning of something I didn't even know I still needed. I took things slowly. I didn't rush into decisions. I didn't think about the future too far ahead. For the first time in decades, I let myself breathe at my own pace. I'd wake up, make a cup of tea, sit on our porch, and just be. Some mornings I watched birds hop around like tiny caretakers of the world. Other mornings I closed my eyes and listened to the wind brushing through the trees. It felt healing in a way words don't always know how to explain. After a week or so, with clearer thoughts and steadier hands, I found a small apartment for rent on the quiet side of town. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't large. But the second I stepped inside, I felt something that house with my husband never gave me. Room to be myself. There were no footsteps behind me, watching everything I did. No chores waiting for me the moment I put my purse down. No judgments floating through the walls. Just a clean, open space that seemed to whisper, "You're safe here." I signed the lease the same day. Moving in was simple. My friend helped me carry in the few bags I had, and for the first time in years, I unpacked clothes into drawers without wondering who would criticize me next. I bought a little table for the kitchen, a soft blanket for the sofa, and a lamp that gave off the warm kind of glow that makes you feel like you're home, even when there's no one else around. The first night in that apartment, I curled up on the sofa with that blanket wrapped around me, listening to the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of cars passing outside. And I realized something. Peace has a sound. A soft one. A steady one. A sound I had nearly forgotten. Days turned into weeks. My body healed. My mind softened. I found myself picking up old hobbies again, reading, knitting, even trying new recipes just because I wanted to, not because someone demanded it. I reconnected with friends I hadn't spoken to in years, people who reminded me of the woman I used to be. Slowly, I pieced myself back together, one quiet day at a time. And then the phone call started. At first, it was my husband. Short, impatient calls that sounded more like interrogations than concerns. "Where are you? When are you coming home? You're being unreasonable. We can talk about this if you just calm down." Calm down. As if fainting alone on the kitchen floor was some dramatic exaggeration. I didn't answer most of those calls. And the ones I did answer, I kept brief. Emotionless. Firm. The way he wasn't used to hearing me. Then the calls began to change. The irritation faded. The commands softened. And suddenly, he sounded unsure. Lost. I didn't realize things had gotten so bad. "I'm sorry if I made you feel unappreciated. I just want you to come back. The house isn't the same without you." That last one, that was the truth. The house wasn't the same. Because without me, there was no one to cook. No one to clean. No one to smooth every rough edge in their lives. My absence made their lives harder, not their hearts softer. After a while, his family got involved. His sister called first, her voice dripping with forced sympathy. "We didn't mean anything by it. You're being sensitive. You know families have expectations. You're embarrassing all of us by running away." Running away. That's what they called choosing peace. Then came his mother, the same woman who used to hand me chores like she was passing down commandments. "You're his wife. You belong in your home. That apartment of yours is just a phase. Come back where you're supposed to be." For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small before their words. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I didn't feel anything at all. Their guilt, their shame, their disappointment, none of it stuck to me the way it used to. My boundaries were no longer fragile. They were steel. Quiet steel, but steel all the same. When they realized I wasn't bending, their tone changed again. Anger. Frustration. Blame. But I had already changed. And there was no going back. My husband tried visiting, but I didn't let him inside. We talked outside the building, under the afternoon sun. He apologized again, but not from a place of understanding, just desperation. "That house is falling apart without you," he said. shaking his head. I nodded politely, but inside, I felt nothing but clarity. It fell apart long before I left, I said softly. You just didn't notice until I stopped holding it together. He blinked at me, stunned, because it was the truth. A truth I finally had the strength to say out loud. He asked me if there was any chance we could fix things. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't want to go back to being the woman I was in that house. A woman who whispered instead of speaking, who shrank instead of standing, who fainted on the floor and woke up alone. I didn't owe that version of myself to anyone, not anymore. I'm choosing peace, I told him quietly, and I'm not willing to give it up again. His breath wavered, but he didn't argue. Not this time. He just nodded slowly, realizing the truth he never expected. I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something better. After that day, the calls stopped. The guilt trip stopped. The apology stopped. And life began. Real life. I filled my days with small joys, buying fresh flowers, visiting the farmer's market, joining a book club full of women my age who laughed too loudly and loved too deeply. I cooked meals I enjoyed. I slept without worry. I sat on my balcony at night watching the sky turn from orange to purple, letting the world slow down around me. And little by little, the pieces of me that had been chipped away in that house began to grow back. Softer, brighter, stronger. One morning, months later, I woke up before dawn. I made myself a cup of tea, wrapped that soft blanket around my shoulders, and sat by the window in my quiet little apartment. The world outside was still sleeping. The sky was brushing itself awake with soft shades of gold and blush. As the first light stretched itself across the room, touching my hands and warming my skin, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not loud, not triumphant, but gentle, complete, deep. And I realized my revenge was never meant to be dramatic. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. It wasn't about punishing them for what they did. My revenge was choosing myself, my peace, my life, my worth. After decades of giving everything to people who gave nothing back, the sweetest justice was finally living without them. I sat there watching the sunrise, breathing in the soft, quiet air, and I felt a warmth inside me that no apology could ever give and no cruelty could ever take away. This, right here, this moment, was the life I thought I'd lost forever. And somehow, after everything, I found it again. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.